I have been traveling to the town of Gettysburg since before I could walk. Multiple times a year, my family and I venture to our tranquil place, our safe haven, a town we all consider pre-disastered, and for good reason. Unlike most children, I was raised hearing tales of the blue and gray soldiers fighting for the freedom of the nation. Lincoln is cherished as a savior in my home, as the man who freed the slaves and kept the nation together when there was fear the house could not stand.
The way Robert E. Lee won battles was he always fighting them on his own terms. He was always able to sort of force a situation where he was able to choose when, where, and how a battle was going to be fought. And that's a huge advantage, even if you're outnumbered by the enemy and is almost going to guarantee victory. But what happened here at Gettysburg is things got out of control, and the Union was able to essentially fight this battle on its own terms.
The Union Army, since they were fighting on July 1st, that the Confederate Army en masse, when the battle began, was closer to Gettysburg than was the Union Army. And to end their day on good ground, to slow up the Confederates, to gain time for the rest of the Union Army to come up, they're going to have to sacrifice a fair amount to take the good ground south of town. So to 15,000 Union soldiers that fought on July 1st, almost 9,000 of them were killed, wounded, or captured. There'd be at least 3,000 Union casualties in the streets of Gettysburg, but it was not a sacrifice in vain, because at day's end, who had the better ground? The Union Army.
We had Union generals like John Buford and John Reynolds who secured the terrain around Gettysburg. Of course, Reynolds would be killed fairly early on in the battle, but he's the one that got the Union infantry here, which was really what they needed to hold on to the terrain. Lee sort of being drawn into this battle, he didn't know how much of the Union Army was in front of him. He didn't know the terrain that they were on it.
Like a new restaurant opens in town. You go there, you sit down, never been there before. What's the first thing you want to see? I want to see a menu. I want to know what they're serving and how much it costs. Lee's in a new restaurant, doesn't have a menu. He found out what he ordered he didn't like and it cost too much. Is he coming back?
And he was working with basically two new senior commanders, A.P. Hill and Richard Ewell, who this was his first campaign with them, and he didn't quite know, it seems, how to manage them properly.
We always talk about Ewell on the first day. Take that hill if you deem it practical, but don't bring on a general engagement until the rest of the divisions of the Army are here, okay? Now, what kind of an order is that? You say it's almost contradictory. It's probably the stupidest order Lee ever gave in his entire military career. Jackson gets that order, what does he do? Well, chances are he's going to do everything he can to take that hill regardless of what the other part of the order is. But Jackson isn't here. Ewell needs a little more clearer picture because he's never worked directly with Lee before.
And while things seemed to have went well for him on July 1st, taking the town, defeating the two Union corps to the north and west of Gettysburg, the situation that he faced on July 2nd and then certainly on July 3rd was really unfavorable to him.
After the first day's fight, the Confederates saw the backs of the Union soldier. They're coming off of 4.5 victories, other battlefields, and they now see the back of the Union soldier. They think victory is at hand. But yet, up on Little Round Top, on the afternoon of July 2nd, you'll have two bayonet charges. One by a gentleman by the name of Joshua Chamberlain, the other one by a bunch of New Yorkers from Rochester, New York, Patrick Henry O'Rourke. The bayonet charges were done almost simultaneously. As a result, they drove a very exhausted Confederate brigade, or parts of two brigades, off that hill. It's a whole lot easier to defend a hill than to attack one.
Longstreet saw the upper hand in a defensive battle and urged Lee to turn the southern flank and form a barrier between the Union Army and Washington. Lee rebuffed Longstreet. Pointing at Cemetery Hill, he said, "The enemy is there, and I am going to attack him there." Longstreet retorted, "If he is there, it will be because he is anxious that we should attack him. A good reason, in my judgment, for not doing so." Lee decided on the third day to storm the center of the Union line with a frontal assault. This birthed the strategy for July 3rd, now universally known as Pickett's Charge.
It is considered the high water mark of the Confederacy.
At 4:30, the morning of the third day, Longstreet tried to sway General Lee's idea of a frontal assault. He told Lee, "General, I have been a soldier all my life. I have been with soldiers engaged in fights by couples, by squads, companies, regiments, divisions, and armies, and should know as well as anyone what soldiers can do. It is my opinion that no 15,000 men ever arrayed for battle can take that position." And this time he, similar to General Lee earlier in the battle, pointed towards Cemetery Ridge.
Well, the Union battle line is in two lines. The main battle line is about 4,400 Union soldiers compacted in a 300-yard front. The forward line is about 1,600 men. When the Confederates attacked, thousands stopped at the Emmetsburg Road because of 6,000 Union infantry firing at them, 28 Union cannons firing canister at them.
I would stay in the road. If I made it that far, that's probably where I would stop.
1,000 men continued on, very brave men, and they hit the first line at the angle. They created about 500 Union casualties at that wall and pushed the majority of the other 1,100 men back. It turned into something called a massed column assault. Well, a massed column assault is fine if it keeps on going. If it stops, it just becomes a huge target.
As the defeated Southern Army made its way back to Seminary Ridge, they were greeted by a distraught General Lee, who apologized to his men, saying, "This has been my fight, and upon my shoulders rests the blame." And the battle that had changed the course of world history was over.
A huge military turning point in the middle of the Civil War. If you look at the way the Civil War was going in the summer of 1863, over here in the area where it really mattered, in between the two capitals of the Union and the Confederacy, Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia, the main Union Army here, the Army of the Potomac, really hadn't won a battle.
Southerners believed they could win as long as Lee believed he could win. Okay, and Gettysburg, in a sense, is the big turning point because here you've beaten Lee. You know, at Antietam, you can argue he was defeated there, but it wasn't perceived as that. Gettysburg's a clear defeat. And if you can beat Lee, you can win the war. I think that this gives great impetus to the Northern peace movement. There's a lot of people who believe the war isn't worth the cost.
And people preaching for peace, people like Horace Greeley are standing up in Congress and saying, "Let the wayward sister go," meaning the South.
If you want to get rid of slavery, let them go. You see, what better way to get rid of slavery than to let the slave states leave the Union, and you don't have to shoot anybody to do it. I've heard this referred to as the Southern Tet Offensive to impact the political situation in 1864. So it'd be like Vietnam. Tet Offensive convinced the United States they couldn't win the war, so we voted Nixon peace with honor. And I see Gettysburg as being that moment in the American Civil War.
You know, Lincoln is not a very strong president in the summer of 1863. If the Confederates can have a victory in the North, in a northern state, there's still a chance of foreign intervention.
Or if the South had been able to convincingly win at Gettysburg, there's still those in England that supported a divided United States. It makes more sense for them if you have more than one country between Canada and Mexico, politically, diplomatically, and also economically.
The Battle of Gettysburg was the final nail in the coffin in terms of European intervention.
If I wanted to be provocative, I'd say that more people would be speaking German today, you see, because certainly the United States, as it emerges from the American Civil War, is a much stronger nation. And arguably you could say that in World War I and World War II, the Allies wouldn't have been able to defeat Germany without our intervention. So I think in terms of international relations, and certainly in terms of the 20th century, the victory, Northern victory in the Civil War was a key.